Hello and welcome to Magic Rabbits,
a podcast exploring the outermost edges of the music business that never was.
Celebrating the masses who never quite made Glastonbury but had the best of times on the journey.
Here's to every one of us.
Hello and welcome to Magic Rabbits, a podcast project for me and Damien, myself, Tim Riley, and my mate, Damien Scott.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to number 3. Thanks for coming along.
Yeah. So the song we're going to be doing at the end of this one, because that's kind of what we do. We do a bit of chat, and then we slot a song in at the end, one from our back catalogue, if you want to excitingly call it that. And the one we're going to be doing today is a song called 1,000 Miles Away, and it's one of mine. And the reason it came into existence in the first place was that I joined a band that Damien and Peter Caddleback were already in, called Boat Thief. There were just two of them. You want to describe what Boat Thief was at that time, Damien?
Yeah, we'd sort of defaulted into being, I guess we would say, folk tinged, although we never liked the F word. Rootsy, raggle-taggle pop stuff. But as a duo, we didn't want to have electric guitars, because that just doesn't work as a duo, really. So we just started buying acoustic instruments, and we started thinking, what can we buy? So Pete had an acoustic guitar, and I thought, well, there's no point just playing another acoustic guitar. It'll just sound the same, although you can put a capo high up and make it sound a bit more, shrill. But we started looking around, and I thought, oh, mandolin. That can't be hard to play a mandolin. And then I found a bouzouki, and that was quite easy to pick up, quite literally, very light. And we just started playing like that, and so inevitably these pop songs sounded a little bit like folk songs because you were playing acoustic instruments, and that's where you came along. Although we'd known you prior to that, and you'd moved back into the area, and
you'd given me a cassette of some work that you and Peter had done at the studio that he worked at, and I thought, hang on a minute, this is fantastic,
and it needs some bass guitar.
Yeah, I just thought, this is absolutely amazing. And so you'd given me this cassette, and I had a little studio at home, and I used to play the cassette and just play the bass along with it and just sing another harmony along with it. So you got 3-part harmonies and bass on this thing. I remember thinking, this is great. And I wonder if they'd like it if I was to play them this.
We didn't have the heart to say no. So, yeah, that was rubbish.
I wonder if I can crowbar myself into this situation that's clearly better than the one I'm in at the moment.
And then the 2 became 3, and it was great. It just gave us the lift. Yeah. And it, we were this, I still think we were slightly folky, but we didn't use that term, and we didn't like that term, but it had a sort of swing to it, but we didn't have any percussion or any drums at all at that time, so we were a 3-piece for quite some time and played for quite a while as a 3-piece.
We did, oh god, yeah.
But we stamped our feet a lot and made a bit of percussive noise.
So the reason this song came, we can go into all that stuff in more detail, but just broadly speaking, the reason that this song came into existence at all was that I wanted to put my songs into the set, or at least impress you guys enough with my songs so that we would start.
You were just slowly inveigling yourself into the band.
Yeah, that's it.
I'll start with bass, and then a few harmonies, and I'll start writing songs, and eventually I will take it over.
I'll just control it all. So I thought, I'll write this song, but Damien will sing it. So that's what happened, and for all the time we toured with it and played it live, you sang it.
Yeah, it was a great song to sing but it was one of those songs that you sang continually a harmony with. So we sort of sang it together. I think mine was probably the more predominant vocal. I was louder, but we sang it together. So you were harmonizing continually through it, and it was just for me, it was one of those really direct songs. It was just a great tune, simple, easy chords, which is great for me. And yeah, I loved it. I loved playing this song live. It just worked. In fact, recently recently you've been playing solo gigs. And just last week, you invited Friday night. Quite a few of us came along to see you, and unbeknownst to me, you got me up to sing this song, which was a great moment. It was lovely in this pretty busy pub in the Lake District, and
it was good.
Yeah, it was great. I had no idea you were going to do that, and we enjoyed it, and we subsequently, well, we've just re-recorded it as well, and that's what you'll hear at the end of this podcast. You'll hear the re-recorded version of it, which is not too dissimilar from the original version that appeared on our album, the Boat Thief, second Boat Thief album, which is on Spotify as well, if you want to seek that out. Boat Thief, Shine is the name of the album, and it's on there, so you can compare and contrast if you like.
The other thing as well that this was heavily influenced by, actually, was the La's. I mean, ever since sort of 1987, you and I had been heavily into the La's. We'd been to see them at the Royal Court. So they were supporting the Icicle
Works at the Royal Court in Liverpool. Yeah,
I mean that's a milestone moment for me. I know it is for you as well.
Yeah,
because me and you and my heavily pregnant wife at the time, Lynn, we all went down to the Royal Court. Quite amazing, because it was sort of summer in 96. Sorry. Yeah, we saw the Icicle Works, because Ian McNabb, he was a great influence on both of us. Great band, but before they came on, this snotty group of scruffy scousers dragged themselves on the stage and did about 20 minutes of fantastic music that just seemed to pour out of them. This magic seemed to pour out of them. And I thought, hang on a minute, I've never seen anything like this before in my life. It was like Hamburg-era Beatles or something, where they were just accidentally brilliant.
And the thing about the La's, and there might be a lot of people listening to this have no idea who the La's are, because they were a blink and you miss them moment in pop music. And what made them so tragic is probably also what made them so great. The fact they only did one album. I mean, Lee Mathers, their front man and singer and songwriter, was quite a troubled individual, and so went really off the rails straight after that first album. And that's all we've got of the La's is probably 8 or 9 songs. I don't know how many songs are on that first album, that only album. But if you haven't heard the La's, and everyone's heard the La's actually, because everyone knows that ubiquitous "There She Goes" song. It's on countless soundtracks, and when you walk into shops, it's being played, and it's one of those absolute classics. But maybe not a lot of people know that it's them, and it's been covered and by other people. But that is one of the tracks, and every track on the album has that quality to it, that just timeless Mersey beat quality that sounds fresh now, and obviously brilliant then. So that was you're right, it was a big influence, and live they were fantastic. And
John Power, who was the bass player, eventually formed Cast.
The Cast, and
they did somewhat better than the La's, I think, because they had a couple of hit singles that did quite well. And even today, John Power is still touring, even on his own, doing sort of, very small. Sorry, just if you can hear sheep in the background, I'm sort of sorry about that, but we thought, should we move somewhere where there's no sheep, or getting into a room where we can't hear the sheep? But then Damien said, no, keep the sheep in, keep them in.
We're in the Lake District, folks, and it's lambing time, and there's
little sheep everywhere.
So
lambs everywhere. Anyway, so John Power, these days he's doing these small intimate gigs where he's talking about the La's and Cast, and he's singing a few songs as well, and he's selling out everywhere, and it's because the legacy that the La's left behind was just brilliant, and so wonderfully. The foundations of that, as you say, you used the word Mersey beat a minute ago. They were definitely a sort of the next generation of.
They even wanted to, when they recorded the album, you'll know more about this because you're more kit focused, having worked in the sort of pro audio industry yourself. But they sought out kind of old desks and all like really retro stuff that had been used in the 60s. They wanted that sound. They wanted stuff with dust on it that that had that sort of analog, super analog quality. So that the recording had a sort of a vintage sound to it, and it does. It works. Absolutely. If you listen to the album, you can think it could have been recorded in the late 50s, or it could have been recorded last week. But it still sounds like it's energetic.
Yeah, I mean, I've been lucky enough to work in lots of studios all over the UK and abroad, and I know that even in Abbey Road, when you go down there, they've got a lot of the old stuff, like the old microphones that people still want to use these days. I want to use those mics.
And how much of that is Emperor's New Clothes, and how much is it real that old equipment and old microphones and old desks and valve amps and all those kind of things? Because a lot of people listen to this go, well, surely it's just the same. It's a guitar, it's a vocal. Does it really make a difference? Can people seek out that kind of vibe and create an audio, an analog audio quality from yesteryear?
You know, here's an analogy that you're going to find a bit odd. But it's like when you go fishing.
You've lost me already.
Exactly. When you go fishing, you make sure you've got the best reel you can get, the best rod you can get, you know, to flick that line out, and the best bait, the best flies if you go and fly fishing. All this, you just do what you can to make sure that every single part of that chain is as good as you can get it. And it's the same with music, in my view. It's the same with music and music production. You know, you've got to give yourself a fighting chance at every step of the way. And yes, there are new microphones. I mean, for example, this is getting very nerdy, but Neumann make the finest microphones in my view. And Neumann U87s and U86s are all over Abbey Road. And they've been there for generations. They've been there for decades. And people still want those microphones on their drums and on their vocals. Now, Neumann make far better microphones than they ever did, but people don't want those. They want the old ones because we all want to sound like the people that we grew up loving. And I do anyway. I still do. And that even goes as far as when you're recording something, the way that you produce it and the way that you pan things to the left and to the right and to the centre, even that is based on the way that you are perceiving a band when they're on stage. So you go and watch a band, the left-hand side is the guitarist over there, the right-hand side the bass player, and then you've got the lead singer down the front playing his acoustic perhaps or his electric, and he's looking straight at you. Then you've got the drums at the back. All this stuff, when I'm producing stuff, all of it is put in the place that I want it to be, so that when the listener is listening to it, it sounds like they're looking at the band, you know. And that's been done for many years. Even George Martin, when George Martin started producing the Beatles, he'd never done any music before. He used to do comedy.
Just comedies with the Goons.
Comedy, yeah. So he hadn't really got a clue what he was doing when it came to that kind of thing. And he would be the first, you know, he would be the first to admit that. And he said that they would just radically pan things all over the damn place, you know. And it wasn't until stereo became, you know, ubiquitous much later that you could do that with great effect. Because when you listen to the early Beatles stuff, you've got all the drums on the left or something and all the vocals on the right. You know, very weird stuff. But I grew up listening to those kind of things, you know, with headphones on or with my head in the gramophone at home, you know, just listening to these things. What's it all doing on the left? Why is all that on the right? And when the backing vocals would come in on a chorus, they'd be all over the place. And I still love all that, and I still do. I like, you know, that kind of production. Anyway, let's get back to what we were talking about.
Yeah, 1,000 Miles Away. What was it? Was it quite a simple song, I guess. I'm going to ask you what it's about, but I'm going to guess it's just one of those relational songs about a
yeah, just, you know, in the lyrics, it just describes a girl that's just all over the place. She's off her head, really, and she just wanders around, head in the clouds, kind of thing.
Based on anyone?
No, it wasn't. I can't pretend it was. No, it wasn't. It was just completely made up.
Yeah. Which
is rare for me, actually. I'm not very good at making things up. I wish I was better at it, because you could write far more. Mm-hmm. But I tend to just write things from my real life perspective. Really.
And that's another interesting thing, because I think that's what we differ like that. And I know, again, I really do not want to make out that we're comparing ourselves with other people, particularly John Lennon and Paul McCartney, but that was the difference between them. I think often people would say Lennon was the honest one and would sing about himself. This is very, very simplistic.
Yeah.
And McCartney could make stuff up, make characters up, make daft situations up, and sing about those. And I think
he did all the way through. It's fabulous.
Yeah. So he was much more the sort of fantasist, and the other one was the kind of realist and very open and heart on his sleeve kind of thing. And I think you do that. And I probably don't. I like sort of writing in the third person, or writing about things and making up some, like the Newlyweds, which was last podcast, or was it the first podcast? I guess
one.
First one. that's just a made up situation about a newly married couple, and I had no one particularly in my mind specifically about that. It was more of a generic, let's make up a story about a newlywed. It's almost like writing a novel and going, let's make up some characters. Inevitably there's going to be bits and bobs of your life experience in there, but you were a bit more, no, I'm going to write about that relationship and that thing that happened. And so which is, broadly speaking, what we did, I guess. So you brought this song to the band that you'd kind of pushed your way into. No, I'm joking. But something happened. Something had happened prior to that, because you were living down in Wigan. We were all up in the Lake District. You were living down. You'd moved down there for your job, which is why our band, the Templemen, had broken up.
Yep.
You suddenly announced, "Oh, I've got a job and I'm moving away," and so we're splitting the band up. Yeah. And I, wept for a week or so in my bedroom.
15 minutes.
And you moved down to Wigan, and that was a couple of years down there. But something before you decided to join us and play bass and sing with us and contribute this song that you're going to hear at the end of this podcast. And something else happened, because you sort of won a competition, didn't you? You won a songwriting competition.
So there was in the local paper, there was a songwriting competition and the prize was a couple of days in the studio. I thought, great, sounds good. I'll give it a go. Did a couple of things on a 4-track.
Do you remember what songs they were?
No.
Okay.
No. A couple of things, sent them in on a cassette, and a couple of weeks later I won. So I won these 2 days in the studio, and I thought, God, in 2 days, what am I going to do in 2 days on my own? It's going to be quite. I'll get a band together and rehearse the band with these songs, and perhaps I can record 5, 6, 7 songs or whatever, and then mix them on the next day. And anyway, so I did that, and we came up with some half decent stuff that I put onto, just like lots of people. Hopefully this podcast will be listened to by people who are in the same situation as us many years later. They're looking back on their musical careers for better or worse. And I did the same thing as we all did, which is basically send cassettes off to record companies. Dear EMI, my name is Little Timmy, and I want you to listen to my tunes and hope you like them. And you'd stick three tunes on a cassette and send them off. Anyway, I didn't send them to lots of record companies. I think there was Polydor, WEA, Go Discs, and Island, perhaps, and set them off. And some to publishers and some to record companies. Very quickly, actually, I was really surprised by, but very quickly, we got contacted by WEA, which is Warner Brothers, in Kensington, on Kensington Church Street. And this is quite interesting. There was a guy there called Ed Forstick, Forsdick, Ed Forstick. And he loved what I was doing. He thought it was great. Wanted us to go down and speak to him. And you can imagine the excitement. You can imagine the excitement of that. Mm. First of all, we haven't got a band.
No. Was this not the genesis of the Big House?
That's exactly what it was.
The band, that was the name of the band you had.
The Big House.
In Wigan at the time.
Yeah. We went down. We didn't have a band, because the only reason we'd actually got these musicians was when I put them together just to do this demo. So we weren't actually a band. So me and the drummer Craig went down, and we spent the day just talking to Ed, WEA, and we had a couple of appointments with other people as well. And it was quite amazing, because Ed was a lovely guy, and what he did afterwards was even more interesting, but I'll come to that in a second. So on that first day, we met him in the morning, and I think we went for a pint with him at lunchtime. We had an interview or a meeting with Go Discs, because Go Discs wanted to talk to us as well, but I told them we were going to be talking to WEA. It's quite an incestuous little thing. They all know each other, and they know that if you're talking to them, they want to see you as well, So we went to see, in Madness, obviously you've got Suggs and you've got Chaz Smash, who was the other lead singer. He's the one that does the nutty dancing. Well, he used to be the A&R chief at Go Discs.
Go Discs, yeah.
And he wanted to see us as well. So we'd finished with Ed, and Ed said, right, well, great, we'll see you later. Then you come see Go Discs and then come back and see me later. I said, okay, fair enough. So we went to see Chaz Smash, and he loved it. He loved it as well. We love this. And I said, well, so did Warner's, and they love it as well. He said, yeah, great, yeah, good, it's good. You've got to have lots of interest. It's good to have everybody into what you're doing. That's great. So he wanted to see us the following week. as well, because he was going to give it to his A&R team, and then they were going to talk about it and what we were going to do. Basically, at that point, we were getting asked a similar question with all the people we saw, because we saw Polydor as well, and we saw somebody at EMI in Soho Square, I think it was. But they all wanted to know, and they all had a version of the same question, which is, what do you want? So they liked what you were doing. So you're sitting there, there's me and Craig, country mice in the town, and we're having this question given to us. So, lads, yeah, okay, we like what you're doing, great. What do you want? And I had no idea. I was unprepared, completely unprepared for that question.
So was there a right or wrong answer to that? You didn't just say, I want to be rich and famous.
Yeah, I want a big guitar. No, very quickly, in fact, the guy from EMI, actually, was the guy that put it clearest. He basically said, listen, lads, we like what you're doing, that's fine, but you have no representation. We can't just talk to you because you clearly don't know what you want. If you had a manager or some kind of team behind you, it would be far easier for us to talk to you about the next stages. He said, because the next stages are many and varied. He said, and this is what they were all saying, because I was asking questions like, what do we do now then? I was just sounding like a naive idiot. I was basically trying to say to these people, all I am is somebody that can write songs. And I won this competition, and now we've got a little band, and, what can you do for us, And they don't know what they can do because they don't know what it is that we want. So we went back to see Ed Forstick at WEA, and he said, look, what I want to do is to get you to record all your stuff really well, and I want to put you in a decent studio around that we use down here, and I want to give you some money to do that. And once we've got that in place, he said, it's all very well having your little cassette that you've given us now, but he said, I just want to have your portfolio recorded really well. Tell me about the band. The band, well, there's me and there's Craig here, and and we had to make things up. And he could see that I was floundering. He just said, listen, I'm going to play all this stuff that you've given me to the A&R department. We're going to talk about what it is we can do with you, and we'll get you down next week. And we'll talk next week. Okay, fair enough. So basically, it all went sour because Ed left WEA, and he went to work with Jonathan Ross. I think Jonathan Ross had a company called Channel X, and they made The Big Breakfast. So Ed Forstick produced The Big Breakfast for many years. And eventually he became Anton Deck's manager. He managed Anton Deck, and he managed their whole career all the way through, right up until quite recently. In the last couple of years, poor Ed died of cancer, I think. And obviously Anton Deck was devastated, as everybody who knew him.
Magische konijnen.
So it kind of begs the question, really, with a lot of musicians, you feel like you can just be a good songwriter or, have some great songs, and you can rock up to a record company and they'll see that and go, don't worry, lads, we'll take care of the rest.
Yeah.
You just write great songs. But you're sort of suggesting that really you have to have much more of a clear idea of who you are, and you have to be a bit cannier. You can't just be, I just write some great songs. Yeah. Please sign me up, and you do everything for me and sort me out a band and it's not like a boy band kind of situation. They want a band to be a band, have an idea of who they are, an identity, which was very much about, I think, when we were Boat Thief, we definitely had a sense of identity, and we had a manager, and we knew what we wanted, and we knew what our shtick was. We knew what our vibe was, and even where we wanted to be several years down the line. I think we just got to a more mature place as people and musicians to go, this is what this is.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're younger, you just go, we'll just play some songs in a room and hopefully they'll sound okay. And sometimes that is the case with certain brilliant,
I think that's
brilliant people.
There's definitely people listening to this now who were in that position where they would send off their cassette, and once it's in the post and it's on the way to their London, they'll just think, that's it, that's the first stage done. We've played the gigs in the pubs, we've saved our £50 here and there, we've had a couple of days in the studio, and now we've sent off our cassette. Let's just wait for it all to happen. But that is absolutely not the case. We only know that now in retrospect. And I think
in a way the whole industry now still does that, but it's been laid on a plate for them now. At that time, someone in a room had to listen to this music and go, is there something in that music? Could this band be big? But now the music industry is completely transformed. Now record companies can actually see whether someone has a following,
Yeah.
because everyone's uploading their stuff to YouTube and Spotify and wherever, and they can get a following on social media.
There's
and
no
people,
risk- no
but
risk
there's no
in-
risk involved anymore. People can go, look, that band have got it together, or that singer songwriter, he or she's got it together.
Yeah.
We can see they've got 10,000 followers on Instagram, and and so many thousand views on YouTube. Yeah, that's a no brainer. We can literally.
I
It's like
think
a
that's the key. It's the risk thing.
Yeah.
Back then there was a lot more money awash in the music industry that was almost like risk money. They were almost speculating to accumulate, like any commercial organisation does. And they're thinking, well, I like these kids. They can clearly write tunes. There's something about them. They're obviously naive and a bit daft, but we've got the people that can surround them and make them into what we want them to be. And of course, that's, as you say, there is no risk anymore because there are millions of people who've seen your video on YouTube or whatever. So potentially a record company could see that and think, well, there's potentially there are millions of people that we can tap into and they can buy the product. So yeah, as far as risk is concerned, it's there was a big risk in those days, definitely.
Do you ever wonder, as Boat Thief singing this song, 1,000 Miles Away, and other songs like that, if we'd been in the era of YouTube and social media, how we'd have fared in the sense of getting a following and reaching such a critical mass that record companies couldn't turn a blind eye to you. They just have to go, let's get those guys signed up. They've got a look, they've got a sound, they know what they're about, they've got a following.
I already know the answer to this.
Oh, great. What is it?
Well, the answer is our manager, Martin Ruby. Now, in the next episode, I would really love us to talk about him at great and what he did with us and how he developed our journey. There's no doubt.
Yeah, we will definitely talk about Marty because he was such a huge part of our lives and a huge part of making Boat Thief what they were and what they could have been. And there's a whole story there, and that will unfold, no doubt, in the forthcoming
in the next
times.
one,
But yeah, listen out for that. But that's that was the difference. Having that fifth person, because we'd got a drummer then. So our manager Martin was our fifth person. Having that in your life, every band needs that. Everyone needs that external person pushing you, encouraging you, and the independent person as well. Because if it's the singer, the songwriter, or the guitarist that's making those decisions, it's going to pull the band apart.
This is what we'd had before he came along. We'd had the little gripes and things. And this is what, as you say, with every band, it's just something as simple as when you're recording something. You've got to make sure there's somebody. It's like a producer will do that job. They will ignore everybody's favoritisms. Obviously the bass player wants the bass to be louder. Well, that's simplifying it all, but that's kind of what happens with three or four people. And the producer's got to understand what it is that you're after. It all goes back to this planning thing and, what do you want? This question, what do you want? You've got to know what you want. If you don't know what you want, there are too many other people that will advise you as to what they think you want. And then everything gets watered down and compromised and the whole thing just gets, ballsed up, basically. And that's the last thing you need. You need to have the plan. You need to go into. We've heard these stories of Springsteen going into record companies with his guitar and just barging his way in and just playing his tunes in front of Seymour Stein or something, some guy with a big cigar, and the guy going, "You're going to go a long way, kid," because he's just ballsy. This is what I want to do. This is me. This is my blue collar dream, and this is what I'm doing. And after a verse and a chorus, you've got it.
You've highlighted the difference there between a strong solo person, albeit with a band. Obviously, Bruce Springsteen had the E Street Band, and you've got to have a band with you. But he was Bruce Springsteen, so Bruce Springsteen could imprint his whole personality and know exactly where he wanted to go because it was him and just him, nothing else. It's my personality, my songs, my vision, and you can push that through. But when you're in a band, and I much prefer the idea of a band. I love the whole idea of camaraderie and compromise and discussing with each other and improving each other and brushing up against each other and arguing with each other so that things become better. I haven't got that personality of I want to be the Damien Scott band or the Tim Riley band or whatever it is. And there's something lovely for me about that camaraderie, for people, for just really,
Oh yeah.
really working on each other. But that comes with a problem, because then you have to decide on your joint personality. You have to have a personality as a band, and that won't be your personality. It won't be you anymore. So you're giving a little bit. Hopefully, it's the sum of its parts, but inevitably, it's not. It's you know, a little bit of them, a little bit of that person, a little bit of that, and so both people are something else.
So this is where the other person
yes,
comes in.
Exactly. So you've got someone who can marshal that.
If you don't have that other person, then you are handing yourself over to a commercial organisation that will do whatever they want to do with you. And so when, you know, that question, what do you want, is such an open and important question. You've got to know what you want, and you've got that other person there who's going to arrange you into this thing, this defined thing. Otherwise, you'll just hand yourself over to a company. You'll just do, you know.
I always think
we think you should do this, you know. Oh dear, great.
I always think of music as a very peculiar thing in the sense of joint, shared, equal process, artistic process, because it's almost like having four people paint a picture. You know, obviously a single artist paints a picture, and my wife's an artist, and, you know, if I were to go in and start and pick up a brush and invite a couple of other people to pick up a brush and start painting with her, she'd go crazy, because writing a book, a novel, or whatever it might be, or writing a poem. It's a very individualistic thing, solo process. But making music is four people all like colliding and going, well, I want this and I want that, and to actually produce a great piece of art, a great song through that process, I think is fascinating, almost impossible.
Yeah.
But yet it happens, and it's who's pushing more of themselves on it, who's pulling back, who's letting go a little bit, you know, and that's all going on. That dynamic's always going on in a room with four people, and when it happens, it's special because it's quite natural.
No doubt.
Волшебные кролики.
I taught music for a while, and during the teaching of performance units, I would get bands together. We would be in the rehearsal booths, these soundproof little sterile environments where everybody would cram in, and you'd close the door and you'd get on with it. And none of these people had played together before, which was wonderful. Absolute clean slate, and you'd start from scratch. And you'd be playing along. So all these people, you've got a drummer, a couple of guitarists, keyboard player, singer, you know, they'd be doing these tunes. And then at some point, something would happen, and they would be inhabited by this thing that had come in the room, you know, this spark. And I know that everybody that's been in a band has had that at some point. If you haven't, then, you know, it's a really unfortunate, you know, it was an open goal that's been missed, basically, because it's a lovely thing to be in an environment where you've got a few people who don't, you know, you're not all joined at the hip. You know, you've all got your different ideas and different lives and whatever, and then something happens that you're made to realise by something else that you are part of the whole, and that lovely feeling of you being just part of something, being a cog in a machine. Yeah. And I know that quite often that is seen as a negative simile, to be a cog in a machine. But I love it. There's something magical about that, about the creation of music. It doesn't happen all the time. It could happen one part in a song. It could happen one song in a set. But I do know that there are times when you and I would look at each other in the middle of a tune on a stage somewhere, and, you know, the lights are low and we're being picked out by these spotlights, and you're almost blinded, but we can look over at each other in the middle of a tune and just think, yeah. And that is something that everybody misses. Once they've had that, they miss it. It's like a drug that used to be in your system, rampant in your system, that just goes, and you can't get it back again. You try all your life to try to replicate that thing, but you'll never get it. You'll never get it because it's so unique.
Yeah, that absolutely fascinates me, that whole idea of people bringing something out of you that you wouldn't have ever been able to do on your own. You can write great songs on your own, you can produce great art on your own, you can do all kinds of stuff on your own, but someone else comes along alongside you and is able to know you and understand you and then challenge you and bring something out of you. I work predominantly in advertising now, and one of the things that exists in the advertising world, in the creative aspect of advertising, are creative teams. And advertising campaigns have been built on the idea of a creative team. And what that means is generally a copywriter and an art director. So a writer and a drawer, if you like, in simplistic terms. And advertising has been built on that for absolutely decades and decades. And because it works, because if you get a writer and someone who can draw, a designer, an art director, and get them together and get them sort of passing bits of paper over to each other and go, what do you think of that? What do you think of that headline? And they'll go, well, what do you think of this image? And then the line starts to blur and you challenge and push each other and it elevates to somewhere. And both of those people could have probably done the campaign on their own, come up with an idea, but it would have been quite one-dimensional. But as soon as you start to build and talk and challenge and argue, and that frisson and that friction that happens between two creative people just elevates and elevates and elevates, and you get to a place, a sublime place you would never have got to. So you end up with this wonderful kind of finished campaign, in this case, in an advertising example, that would never have happened if one, even brilliant creative, they could be brilliant, but it would just be very singular and very linear. And you need those quirks and those to go off in odd places and create.
In a musical, yeah, you're absolutely right. And in a musical sense, it's, when you're writing a song, you're very different. You've always been very different because from its very inception, you were always ready for it to be changed. So you would bring a song as any band does. The writer brings the song to the band, plays it in front of, it's the most nerve-wracking part of any songwriter's journey. You play it in front of your band, hoping that somebody's going to at least go, that's great, that's great. Or just, raise an eyebrow or something. Oh, right, okay, great. It's in then, But you were always definitely the one that would bring stuff to the band and play it. And knowing that me and Peter would go, yeah, great, well, we can do it this way, or we could do it that way, So you'd always be elastic in that way, which is wonderful. Going back to what you've just been saying about, working in the advertising industry, that's because you are that kind of person. You know that you can throw it open to not necessarily criticism, but at the very least development, which is wonderful. Both Peter and I, absolutely not, absolutely not, especially me.
And I think that if I dare to actually break that down, I think that's partly down because you could try and make out that to be a negative. That
negative.
No. No, bringing something and going, I don't want that changed. Kind of actually, you could say that's negative. But I think what it was with you is you are just a lot more musical, and you can hear things. You can hear the arrangement in your head. Where I'm not musically literate enough to do that. And I'm not being self-deprecating. I'm being absolutely. If people ever ask me whether I'm a musician, and people sometimes say, "Oh, Damien, he's a musician," I will always say, I'm not a musician. I want you to know I'm a songwriter, and I've got a guitar that I use basically to scribble ideas down with. That's it. I'm not a musician. Because when people say you're a musician, they expect you to be able to sit down and play some wonderful classical piece, or just be able to play any song. And, play some Beatles song. I don't know any. I don't really remember them. I'm not that good, but I can play some of my own probably if I can remember them. Anyway, but I think that it's about the fact that you have all that in your head. You very clearly can see and hear the song in its fullness. And so when you have that and you bring it to someone, they go, tell you what, let's play that at half the speed. Or tell you what, I'm going to put a big crunching electric guitar over the top, where you were thinking of it as more melodic and orchestral. That you kind of go, no, that's not how I heard it. Whereas I just hear 3 chords and a bit of a melody, and if someone goes, oh, I could put this to it, and this is a bass line, I'll go, yes, that's great. I didn't hear that.
So if you think about who is better suited to be in a band,
well,
you know what I mean.
But you had no choice. We still broke it down. You sat there begrudgingly playing the bass line, going, this is nowhere near how I heard it in my head, and we'd all be going, it's great though, it's great.
But I would definitely weep inside.
You would, and you. Well, no, it wasn't on the inside. You would wear it very much on the outside. Yeah. You could see we'd all be playing this great song, like 1,000 Miles Away or whatever. And let's trail that song again. And we'd look over to you, and you'd have a face like thunder. And we'd all be joyously playing this song, and you'd be going, "It's not how I imagined it. It's not how I imagined it."
This is not how this song is.
Even live, we'd look over and we'd see you there, fuming still.
But how immature of me. you know, because the song itself hasn't even been, it's been born, but it hasn't been, you know, bred yet. And it's only when something's been bred, whether that be in a rehearsal room for ages or live for ages. You know, so often young bands write stuff and then go and record it. You know, you've got to let it breathe. You've got to let it live first. Actually get some legs, you know, before it becomes...
But play in front of an audience,
Definitely.
you know, get the sense of how it sounds in the room when you play it in front of, you know, a few hundred people, and play it a lot in the rehearsal room and, you know, let it develop.
I mean, we played a lot, you know, around the UK, but we also played the Edinburgh Festival a couple of times, the Fringe Festival a couple of times, which we'll talk about in greater detail in a future podcast. But that, you know, when you're up there for a week, you know, playing all day, every day, all through the day, all through the night, very little sleep, just working all the time. And then you come back and start playing gigs, you know, elsewhere. Those songs have changed. They've become different animals altogether. Or at least better, stronger things, you know, more robust tunes.
And you learn to play together as well, and you learn each other's idiosyncrasies, and live you start to really understand people musically. You know each other as people, but it's getting to know people as musicians and go, oh, I can just throw this in now and I know they'll respond to it. And sometimes we are those little call and repeat kind of things that we'd do. We'd start adding to songs and they'd appear in songs slowly. And one of those things is also probably hints at our little theme tune, which one day we may divulge why we're called the Magic Rabbits, or we may not, but that is a similar story, but we won't go into that right now.
Zauberhasen.
Okay, well, I think we could probably bring this one to an end then.
Okay, so we spent a day re-recording the song, and we weren't fully happy with it initially. We'd recorded it and thought, oh, it lacked something, and then the difference being you went back and thought, yeah, I'll put some live drums on that. So you we're in your studio now, in your home, very nice studio room, and you set up a drum kit and recorded some live drums, some real drums over this, rather than kind of just drum track or MIDI kind of keyboard triggered drum sounds. And so this is a real, and it freshened it up, and we were a lot more happy with it. A lot more happy with it. Is that a good? We were happier. We were happier. Yeah. That's how we say it.
I like that word. So we'll play out with this one, and hopefully we'll see you at the next podcast. So thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. Ta-ra.
From here, even when she's right here, and her vacant stare means she's never quite there. She's 1,000 miles away. She's 1,000 miles away. With her head in the clouds, she skips around the town. No one knows the sanctuary she's found. She's 1,000 miles away. She's 1,000 miles away. She's away from here, even when she's right here. No one knows the sanctuary she's found. She's 1,000 miles away. She's 1,000 miles away.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. We really appreciate it. And if you could like and subscribe or even leave a review, that would be just brilliant. Anyway, see you again soon. Bye.